Welcome to Robotics and Automation News webinars, where you can be part of a global event without leaving your home or office. Attend our live webinars and communicate directly with influential professionals in your industry.
Hello, my name is Abdul Montakim. I'm editor of Robotics and Automation News.com. In this interview, I speak to Gemma, who is currently the Chief Regional Officer at Kuka Robotics. He was previously the President and Chief Executive Officer at Kuka Robotics.
My name is Gemma, and I am what we call Chief Regional Officer for the Americas for the Kuka Robotics Automation Group. I've been with them for about 5 years. I've been in the automation industry a little over 30 years now, and my responsibility is to obviously the profit and loss responsibility for our group, the Kuka Group, but also certainly to grow our business, and most important is to interface and understand our customers' needs along the various platforms we work in.
I haven't done a video with anyone at Kuka, which is kind of ironic for me because I really like Kuka's video output. I don't know if you pay attention to their very arty sort of Kuka robotic videos. There was one in particular that I remember where very, very large Kuka robots were handling massive beams of steel. There was about 6 or 7 of the Kuka robots in a line, and they were all lifting and moving these massive beams of steel, all in synchronicity. So it's very, very interesting, and I think I like the company basically. But tell us your background at the company. I mean, when did you join, and how have you got to where you are?
So Kuka Group actually is a little over 120 years now. We celebrated 120 years last year, and it started really in gas lighting, and over time evolved as a business. In fact, Kuka in the 50s was the first one to develop automation technologies around welding strategies. Then in the 70s, they were the first ones to utilize what today we call robotics with the motor technology. It previously was hydraulics, so they're the first ones to use electric motors. And then in the 90s, early 90s, actually, Kuka was the first one to use a PC-based control platform for the system. And continuing that innovation technology approach, we were the first ones to work in the what we call today collaborative environment, or human-robot collaboration environments. In fact, over about 15 years ago, we introduced a product. I thought you might have mentioned that's also one of the cool videos we have. We call Robo Coaster, or Kuka Coaster, where we actually do it as a ride and people ride on it. And there's various entertainment areas now at parks around the world that use Kuka product for entertainment. There's a new, I don't know if you've seen it, but a new show out called The Mental Samurai with Rob Lowe, and the person in the hot seat, so to speak, actually is at the end of a module that's managed by our robot, and it's part of our entertainment group, and they'll move them around. It's interesting to see. If you have some time, tune in and take a look at that. But that is our robot also. So we're across a lot of different industries. Certainly automotive is the largest in the world, and across the automation business in automotive, we are the largest in that sector. But we're in aerospace, we're in medical, surgical, semiconductors, various other industries, and certainly consumer products. So it's pretty diverse. I started my career actually earlier in working in a company doing pipes and ports and restraints for power plants. I worked in a nuclear division, more of a mechanical engineering type, went to project management. And then I went to, 1985 actually, went to an automation company as a project manager. Eventually from there went into sales for that company, headed up their sales, and spent 12 years doing that from the integration technology side. And then in 1996, 96, I joined another OEM manufacturing robots and worked for them for about 18 and a half years. And then 5 years ago came to Kuka. And in my role here, I was the CEO for that former company, and I took on the CEO role here in the US, and then progressed to the regional role about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, took over responsibility for all the Americas. So that's kind of a snapshot of my history and the Kuka history.
Yeah, it's very impressive, I must say. President and CEO of Kuka Robotics USA, and then going on to more Kuka work. I actually find it very interesting and surprising that Kuka robots are increasingly being used in the entertainment industry. I know that I've seen the kind of robotic ride thing that you're talking about. I think they have it at some events and shows. I've seen pictures of it. But I didn't know that, and we get a lot of readers for things like that. Whenever we publish stories about dancing robots, Kuka robots, and this kind of ride robot, which surprised me that we got so many readers. But now that you mentioned that you are getting more inquiries or even sales in that sector, that now makes sense. But as you say, the automotive industry is by far the largest. But can you try and give some sort of estimation of percentages? I know you sort of said automotive is the largest and entertainment is perhaps the newest, but can you give a sort of estimate in terms of how your sales and business is categorized in terms of percentages?
Sure. Actually, I can tell you globally in 2018, 50% roughly of our business globally was in what we call the automotive sector. So that's, but again, automotive sector for us is not just the robots, it's also the automation technology we provide, because we actually have part of our group builds lines for the automation, for the automotive companies, the whole process line. So that business for us was 50% of our business. And then the other 50% was split among those other, some of those other areas I mentioned, the material handling in general industry, we call it, certainly the aerospace and semiconductors, some of those other, and medical and surgical. But entertainment also, as you mentioned, that's actually been a fairly good business for us, but actually even a growing business, as it's giving a different variety to that world in terms of the rides around the world. So China, we think of them as a manufacturing, but they've also been one of the bigger areas for us in terms of acquiring equipment for entertainment and rides in some of these parks, the big parks like the Universals and parks like that.
Yeah, and then you've got in terms of new sectors, this term collaborative is used quite a lot. I know it's sort of an official regulated term, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but ISO and other standards do have a recognition for collaborative robots, and I believe that Kuka has launched a collaborative robot probably last year or the year before, and I was interested in how that's doing and what kind of markets that is aimed at. And also I noticed that that collaborative robot is now mounted on one of those kind of logistics wheeled robots. So you've got a mobile robot at the bottom with wheels that can probably autonomously move around. But on top of it, you've got a Kuka robotic arm, which is probably collaborative. And I know it's kind of fairly new, but I believe there are some companies that are using it now, possibly on a test basis. But you can give us an insight into those kind of collaborative and mobile technologies that Kuka is developing and marketing now.
Sure, I'd certainly like to talk more about that. Actually, the collaborative, that robot you talk about, in fact, I'm fond of saying, so you mentioned the IFR. I actually was a past president of the IFR, sit on the boards for the IFR and the RIA. So collaborative, I like to clarify when the opportunity arises, there is no such thing as a collaborative robot. It's really collaborative application, because even our robot, if you put a feather at the end of the arm and I run it against your wrist, you'd probably let me do it all day if I needed to. But if I put a razor blade there, you wouldn't even allow me to do it probably once. So yet it's the same robot. So it's not really collaborative robot. People use that term and it's a little misleading. It's collaborative application. And we have made a robot for collaborative applications now for several years, actually. We were one of the first ones with a 7-axis with force sensing in all the axes, be able to manage so it can be in the same space with a human being and not put the human at risk. Now you mentioned the what we call the KMR EWA platform, so the mobility mixed with a robot and be able to work in an environment, again, where people can be. I think actually one of the things that I wouldn't say it's disruptive as much as it's transformational conditions today in the automation world. We're moving, or having the opportunity now to move the automation to the process rather than always bringing other way around. We always brought the product to the automation cell. The automation cell was always fixed. Even if you think about the automotive lines, it comes down the line, there's a painting robot, and it paints the robot, the car as it comes by, and then goes out. Today, we have the ability to move the robot to the process. So areas like aerospace is a good example. They were one of the earliest ones to adopt, say, mobility platform with automation, because it's such a big product. It's almost not impossible, but it's not realistic to move a fuselage to be able to work on it. So you have to work around it. And so a lot of it was done with human beings. But now with the ability with mobile platforms, which we have, again, pioneered, we are able to do work with and around the fuselage by bringing automation to the process. And that study spread across a lot of other industries, not just in something so large. Going from a machine tool to machine tool and bringing parts with, as you mentioned, the product we call, and others do it too, by the way, mobile platform with robots. We do believe we're a leader there, but with you can have parts, say blank parts on the mobile platform, bring them to a machine tool, unload the finished part from the machine tool, reload with the blanks, go over to another machine tool, bring it, go to a storage area, etc. So it gives a lot more flexibility from that through that transportation technology. And while AGVs have been around for a while, the technology that really, I'll say the sensor technology probably is really what's changed dramatically to help that happen. But it's not just sensor, it's software capability, navigation, LiDAR, things like that to recognize where space is in relation to where the equipment is, mapping, SLAM, I'm sure you've heard that, simultaneous localization and mapping. So SLAM technologies, all those things have allowed for us to be able to move that whole automation environment to a whole nother level. It really opens new fields for automation.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time in that sense. It's probably always an interesting process year to year. You probably see a lot of innovations over the course of your career. You've seen them in factories, but I feel that this is I don't know, maybe, I mean, I'm new to the field, but it seems like a time when there are a number of technologies converging possibly, and there is a lot of changes around. And although I don't like to use cliches like revolution and all that, but there's a lot of buzzwords being used: Industry 4.0, smart factory. We'll get on to talking about some things like that. But what do you think of the overall situation in terms of change and way things are, developing?
Well, I think you hit on something there. I do agree with you. Revolutionary, I think, is maybe a little bit too. That's why I use the term transformational, because we're transforming. It's giving more flexibility, unrestricted maneuverability. Again, you talk about the mobile platform. There's no predefined routes necessary anymore. Gillette's a good example of using the AGVs of the past. And not that they're not changing, but they invested in that technology 20 years ago. But it was with tape, it was very defined, restricted management of that process, restricted even what it could handle, where it could go. So it didn't really augment manufacturing the way it can today. But since we have this capability of the safety laser management system, where it can be more easily in space where humans are, it can carry different types of products and recognize where they need to go based on self-mapping technologies. You mentioned the 4.0, certainly the machine learning and understanding, and they can also communicate across each other because technology advances. It's also freely scalable. So if the manufacturing changes, you need to grow it. It's not like, and I'm not picking out other technologies, but a conveyor system is a conveyor system. Once it's fixed, it's pretty fixed. Where with something like this, it's really scalable. It's a modular system. So it's really, from that sense, really transformational. And as you mentioned, the seamless digital networking and the factory, smart factory of tomorrow really is today because of some of these things. It's already possible. And it can be retrofitted any time in the future very easily because of that flexibility, adaptability. It's very unique. And I think you also hit on the fact that in the last, I've been at this industry a long time, like I said, the last, say 4 to 5 years have been probably the most dynamic, most exciting time for our industry because of all these convergence of technologies and improvements, sensor technologies, vision technologies, software technologies, ease of use capabilities. It just all converging over the last several years, allowing for so much more opportunity. And that's why we're seeing such huge growth. If you look at the historical numbers, just using robots, because that's a number we track globally, and the IFR is an example of that. In 2009, I believe it was something around 60,000 robots were sold globally. 60,000 globally. That's everywhere, all types of robots, all articulated scarers, etc. In 2018, almost 400,000. Now, maybe it doesn't sound like a huge growth, but it is, especially if you look at the years going into 2009. I think the maximum year prior to that was 80 or 90,000 robots. It was a pretty flat level for many years. And part of it was, promise of future, but some of the technology that we have today wasn't available. Software, ease of software. You think about your phone, the technology that we use and it's intuitive, and it really made a difference for us for mobile phones. That same kind of change has evolved in the automation technology, allowing for this rapid, huge growth over the last several years. And it's really been the last, I say, 3 to 5 years we've seen that. And we don't suspect that that curve is at a flattening point. It will have its points where it'll flatten and grow again, but we still think we're on the very upswing of that curve because of these technology advances.
Okay, the smart factory is a term that probably instinctively a lot of people understand what it means. It means highly automated, digitized, and more efficient and so on. But you could, I know you described some of the features of what a smart factory probably is, or a smart process is, but what are the benefits? What are they looking for? I mean, it's too easy to say. For me, I would just say greater efficiencies, greater productivity, but beyond that, you could probably, maybe elaborate on those things and go a little bit further into what it is that manufacturers and industrial companies, logistics or whatever, are looking to achieve in investing in some of these technologies are going to be new and going to be requiring new investment, I suppose. So why should they go ahead and invest in developing their smart factory or whatever?
And I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on smart factory, but certainly we have exposure to that, and that's part of our business and some of the involvement of our industry. We all are getting a better understanding of where that's being utilized. But let me tie back to, maybe we talked about one of the traditional industries, the automotive industry. Now, the automotive industry traditionally get chassis or body parts around the factory. They had overhead transport systems, and once they were installed, they were pretty fixed, and also fixed around a body style, body environment. So it really limited that flexibility. Mercedes is a good example. It was certainly one of the ones that adopted fairly early, and there's a plant that you're probably aware of in Alabama. It's a fairly large facility. They have over 100 AGVs, or what we call mobile platforms, because not really AGVs, they're more a mobile platform, in their plant now, bringing materials to and from the process or production lines, where now, again, it gives them complete flexibility, can be easily retooled for a different style. It's not fixed to a particular environment, so if they need to change where a line is or how a line is positioned, or whether they want to make that doors or closures, et cetera, they can easily adapt because of this flexibility, this scalability. If they need to grow it, they can add more of these, and because of that mapping, And that's kind of where the digitalization comes into that mapping capability, understanding who they are, so they self-control, they learn from each other where the best optimum role or path to take. And if another unit is already in that path, it can understand and learn from the previous information from the other systems to re-navigate itself within the plant floor. Those aren't opportunities they had in the past with I'll call it the older technology, the more traditional technology till now. So that transporting materials to the production line, automation of the quality control has improved because of that. The real time of we've gone to real time manufacturing, or just-in-time manufacturing quite a while ago, but this makes it even more relevant to them and recognizing where they are on the plant floor all the time, work in process. So, and again, it can be retrofitted into existing environments with the technology we have today. And then from a learning environment, we can share information across multiple plants. I just had an experience with another equipment supplier, and they recognizing an error in a single plant, or at least looked like an error in a single plant. It shared information across the other plants to see if this was an anomaly or this was a new standard, so to speak. And it turned out it's a new standard, and recognized that based on sharing information across those other platforms real time. And it's kind of a machine learning strategy using the technology environment we have today, and based on that feedback could react to the process it needed to do. So this again didn't exist in the past, and it exists today, and it makes it better quality, better process throughput, and again more flexibility and adaptability in new environments, but also existing environments.
I wanted to ask a couple of things about business, general business, I suppose. But I thought I'd ask you first, what is it you think that makes Kuka as successful, maybe not historically, but right now and going forward in the last few years and modern recent times? What is it that's made it so successful? It's obviously one of the largest industrial robot manufacturers in the world. Is it things like accuracy of the robot, repeatability, these kind of numbers? Are they the key, or is it the ability to integrate more efficiently the service you provide? Or what is it that has helped Kuka become not only a global company already before the merger or acquisition by Midea, but now it's on the threshold of even more growth, partly because it has access to the Asian market through Midea. And Midea itself is, or Midea, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's so huge. It has its own requirements. So the production of Kuka robots, I suppose, will go up because of that. So give us an insight into what it is that Kuka is, what makes Kuka successful.
It's a combination of things. Certainly, we do believe that we have some product technology conditions, as you said, accuracy, and I want to be fair. I have been a spokesperson for our industry. I think all of the equipment that's out there has its strengths and certainly has a place. So, the market's growing so rapidly. There's a need for all of us out in that market space. But Kuka, for sure, and we do believe in, and I am confident we have some technology advances. Some of the things like Industry 4.0, we want to, for the first ones, get involved in that and utilizing the connectivity of equipment across that, and understanding what's going on with the equipment, so we can give that information back to the owner of the equipment. So there's that. I think also, if you talk about the full breadth of Kuka in terms of our capability, so we have the ability, again, not just from a robot, but we have the mobility platforms as an example, expanding what we are. We have logistics automation as part of our group. You mentioned the Midea relationship. Also, Swisslog was part of an acquisition with Kuka 2014, I believe it was, 15. And that augmented even more technology capabilities for us to bring to our customers. So I don't want to say we're everything to everybody, but we're more things to the right customers. And that's one of the reasons we've had such success. So I mentioned Mercedes earlier. They're not only using the robotics technology, our systems installation capabilities and learning technologies, but also mobility platforms and logistics. Tesla's another good example of that. They use our logistics group for their first in, first out management of the body parts to manage their manufacturing, and they're using our robots on the manufacturing floor. So having that breadth of capability across that, and certainly, as you mentioned, being a global company, more and more companies today are looking for that capability to be consistent across their manufacturing around the world. So having a consistent partner that way that understands the business, has the scalability as a company to support them across the world is becoming more and more important. You've heard, and I'm sure many times said yourself, the world's getting smaller. It really is even on the manufacturing platform from that perspective, and having consistency across that's really important because the consumer is pretty consistent across the world. So the desires and needs are expected the same, and so the output has to be the same. So providing that kind of consistency has been a strength of Kuka. And then finally, and I mentioned earlier that if you look at our parallel over the history, we continue to be an innovator. We continue to be on the cutting edge of technologies and in stretching technologies. And in fact, you'll often hear what's called the 5 stages of collaboration. We say it's actually 6 stages of collaboration. And as you mentioned, the mobility platform with the collaborative robot on it is another stage of collaboration where it's in an environment that, again, couldn't have even been considered in the past. And there's things we don't know yet of the future, but things we're working on that will bring in terms of therapeutic robotics, things like that, staying on the cutting edge of technologies. And that's a strength of Kuka, and our customers know that. And then finally, I guess, working closely with our customers on product development strategies to meet their future needs and not just developing products and hoping that they'll use it. We work very, very closely with many of our customers, some of them larger, some of them smaller, but in developing product strategies around the needs of the market that they need to be more productive and serve their customers.
Yeah, and I think finally, I'm sure I can come up with loads of other questions, but one of the last questions, the idea of competitors, new startups, there's so many of them now in all sorts of fields. And with China becoming quite interested in things like robotics and artificial intelligence in the last year or two in particular, what do you think of the newer companies, cheaper possibly, with cheaper models, similar robots of all kinds really being developed, not just in China, but elsewhere as well. There's all over the world, there's a startup culture seems to be emerging with new kind of innovative products and probably at lower price points. I don't know, but I know one of the strategies for larger companies is to buy up startups, I suppose. But I don't know, what do you think of the startup culture, and what kind of things does it bring to industry as a whole, and how does it affect an established company like Kuka?
Well, I would say generally our feeling is we applaud that the incubation of those kinds of technologies and those opportunities they are bringing to the forefront the possibility of more people understanding automation technologies. As you said, in many cases they may be less expensive in terms of the initial investment, but it's getting people aware of and understanding technology. So it's bringing it more to the everyday space that couldn't in the past. Small, medium-sized companies and more small companies can start to work with and understand the technology. And that has been maybe prohibitive in the past, not so much of the cost of the equipment perhaps, but also it's the cost of the resources to support that and around that. But because of this innovation of the software development, the easy to use software capabilities that they're utilizing and pushing us to improve our product from that perspective, we think it's actually a benefit to our industry and a benefit to Kuka. And we also help incubate. We do have actually annually we fund companies to work on development strategies, and then some we bring into the fold. Some we will help them to spin off into their own company and collaborate with. So we would certainly support that. And there are some device insights, example from the technology space of Industry 4.0 that was a startup that we ended up acquiring to bring into the full visual components, another from the visual management software capabilities. So we will also acquire, as you suggested, that's certainly part of the strategy, but also supporting in that incubation as an industry. We believe it's a good thing. And again, bringing visibility to more and more people in the market space. And again, in North America, it's tantamount that happens. Our density to robots in North America compared to what we have around the rest of the world is really behind the rest of the world. So there's certainly a lot of opportunity, and we think that it's prohibitive where, from the perspective of not enough people have had the opportunity to invest in and understand the technology. So bringing it forward with these other companies and startups, we're fully in favor of it from every level. The software, the mechanics, electronics, controls, we certainly support that, and we think it's a benefit to the industry and certainly a benefit to Kuka.
Yeah, so sorry, I usually take too long to ask too many questions, but yeah, I find it really interesting, especially with I mean, as you said yourself earlier, it is a very interesting time for the industry. There's a lot of changes and innovations, and I found it very interesting that Kuka bought Visual Components, and you know, from a kind of, I've not played a lot of computer games, but it looks like a computer game. It looks fun to use, and the idea of simulating entire factories with robots inside them and everything else, it just looks like a great tool, really, to design things before you actually. I know architects are supposed to do those kind of things. I don't know what the difference is really, if I think of it that way, but I'm sure there is. But that kind of thing really interests me. The artificial intelligence really interests me. I know that Kuka is partnering with some other company on something called Konyun or something, Konyun or something. It's deep learning for industry. This might be outside of your area, but you know, how does things like that work in terms of how does artificial intelligence or deep learning or machine learning fit in? I mean, I can understand image recognition. That's the extent of my understanding of machine learning. Camera takes a picture or video, and some machine learning algorithm processes that image, because there's a lot of data involved, and it has to, you know, requires a lot of computer power, intelligence, or whatever. But the deep learning part, I mean, what does it do beyond that? I mean, can it run a whole factory or even a global operation with many facilities? You know, the idea of, you know what I mean, the idea of a sort of overarching global artificial intelligence running everything for you. Yeah, those kind of things on the in the pipeline, or at least in pipe dreams, Kuka, or anywhere else.
You hit on the fact that I'm probably not in my expertise in that area, but one thing I think we would say in the industry is the next 2 to 3 years, it's more difficult to predict what that will look like and what that machine learning, what that impact will be like. But 20 years from now, we have a pretty good view of, we do think that the technology is going to continue to evolve, where you will have more of that lights out type of factory where the machines will learn. And again, there's still the creativity part that it's going to need the human interface and those kinds of skills. But the routine, mundane tasks will be learned and improved. Kind of like everything we do. If you, although I wish I hit the golf ball better, but if you hit it more frequently, you definitely get better at it. And the same with the robot in terms of machine learning. It'll have and continue to have, today it already does, but it'll continue to get even refined better, where it'll learn and continue that learning process to maximize that, and then understanding and maximization, then use that maximum condition in whatever this task is required to. And we do see that as the longer term future. Is all the technology, all the capability available today? Maybe not completely, but it's fast emerging. So it's not a distant future, but the next 2 to 3 years, it's such a dynamic environment. It's almost impossible for me to say what that's going to look like in the next 18 months, 24 months. But is it possible to take machine learning data and improve processes and have less human interaction to be able to have to manage that upfront, to actually have to program it? Yes, we do believe that is true and already starting today.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
I want to thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion. There's certainly some very good questions, and I hope that the answers were close to what you're hoping to learn from us. We do appreciate from Kuka and from myself to have this opportunity to share some of our thoughts and our vision. And we are very excited about the future. And I know our industry in general is very excited about what's going on in this environment and continues to see it grow at such a rapid pace. It couldn't be more exciting. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Send us an email at sales@roboticsandautomationnews.com to register for one of our many upcoming webinars. And if you'd like us to host your webinar, we have a range of options, including long-term lead generation packages and marketing campaigns. We look forward to hearing from you soon.